All right, I want to welcome everybody to the April 18th work session. I could call this work session to order and get approval agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Mr. Risner, you want to start us off and lead us in the right direction?
Sure. I think there was some conversation about starting off looking at the projects that we're doing through the PFA bond proceeds, and in addition to the money we got, the $3.9 million from the state ARPA funds. And so we just wanted to give you a quick update on kind of where those are and some thoughts about where we go from here on those projects. I'll send that around. Y'all can just take one of those. So we started with about $19.4 million, and again, that's the bond proceeds, state ARPA money. The first project we did there was Sand Creek Trail. That was $1.25 million. That's complete. That was a part of the larger Graham Road project. Currently, we've got out for bid the Howard Roberts Road part of that Graham Road project. The bid award for that is scheduled for May 2nd. The next part of that we had looked at bidding out was the part of the 49 area that goes out to Kitchens Road, and that's the area that's currently without water. Once we get through that, we felt like it was important to address the water supply issues, and so you'll see Masseyville Well, Henderson, and the Grizzleville plant upgrades, and then the elevated tank. And so our thought was to go in that order to address those. That gets you to $14.5 million, leaving a total of $4.8 million. Tim, I'm not trying to steal your thunder. I was just rolling with it. At today's prices, when you add everything that we originally intended to do, we're somewhere around $25 million. And so the work you see there, Highway 49 to Kitchens Road, Homer Roberts, so those are reduced. That's a reduced scope from what we originally intended in the Graham Road area. It's a reduced scope from what we originally intended in the Highway 49 area. So after you get through all these, you got $4.8 million left over. Tim and Brandon and I have done some looking and talking about all this. I think at this point the recommendation will probably be to, when we get through 1 through 5 there, take a look at going back to the Graham Road area and the 49 area and doing some additional line work there with that remaining money. And hopefully by that point we'll have some relief on prices. Will it ever do everything we originally intended? Probably not. But I think for now that's just kind of what we wanted to present as a potential way to get at that.
So this is the scaled down version to come up with the $6 million short that we're currently, is that correct?
Right. If you look at the original scope of those, we're about $6 million short.
Yeah, because I thought the 49 was going all the way on up to Moore Stevens, correct?
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot more that we originally intended to do there.
The project that'll go to bid will go out that far. We've got about, between Sand Creek Trail and Homer Roberts, we're gonna have about 25,000 feet of pipe in the ground. And we'll go out 49 the same amount. So both areas will get equal amount, and we'll just fill in the gaps of what we got left. Hopefully, y'all had originally talked about building a water spheroid, which is the golf ball style tank, which is item number 5. We're gonna bid an alternate for a leg tank, which is about $800,000 cheaper. We'll know for sure, and hopefully a leg tank will be okay. And that'll give us more money to run land with.
How many gallons would that be in that tank?
Look at 750,000.
It's hard to believe that the prices have escalated to this point, that from the time we all voted to do this to now.
I think a lot of the problem is You know, Jason sent me an email today, a county north of us bid 25 miles of asphalt road work. Nobody showed up. 25 miles is probably $8 million, $9 million project. Anybody passed on it.
Really?
That's the fourth or fifth time that's happened this year. There's not enough people to go around.
You know, the conversation we had with Macon Water Authority not just a week ago was, the notification, what was it, chlorine, was it four times, before they even delivered it? That, they called Macon Water Authority and said, we're just gonna let you know what it costs before we send it, because if you don't want it, we need to know. We got 4 other people want it, and the price is 4 times higher than what they've been paying for it. They had to have it, so I don't know, you know, what do we do? I think you're seeing the same thing on your chemicals too, aren't you, Brandon?
Yes, and right now they're holding a contract, so they can't increase it.
Right.
But if we want for that contract, yeah.
It's scary. I don't know where it's going to stop. Any questions for?
Do we have? Are we still working on the new scope of work? What we estimated this to where to go to? Just because I know we're going to get calls. Hey, is my road still on the list? Are you coming to my house?
Right now, Homer Roberts Road goes from Light and Tie.
That's in Dave. I
Old
ain't
Gray
worried about that.
Highway 49 runs from Light and Tie and Garrison. It fills in the section on Garrison, and then picks up at Pierce Chapel and goes out Morris Stevens, and a little bit of Morris Stevens.
What did we cut out of Graham Road?
We hadn't filled in from the old Gray Highway around Sand Creek Trail. That's what has not been done yet.
On Gray Highway.
On Graham
Okay.
Road.
On Graham Road.
On Graham Road. We're tying on at Light and Tie and running to the old Gray Highway there behind Central Baptist Church. And stopping. And we're picking up, we're gonna close the loop on Garrison Road there behind Peacocks. And then we're gonna pick up at Pitts Chapel and go out Morris Stevens. Go to Morris Stevens and go out Morris Stevens, I think, within a mile, half a mile.
So coming down Sand Creek, we're not going up Graham Road that way. We're coming across by the
Right
church.
now, no. I would assume we would fill that in with the 4.8 million.
Yeah, because that was the bulk of our customers, wasn't it?
Same with 49, when you go out Morris Stevens and
Yeah.
Grizzleville shortcut, that's where all the customers are.
So that was going to be my question. So you're not going to make it to the customers, or you are going to make it to the customers?
Right now, we're gonna get a few of them, but we're not. For me to get all the customers, I know I need $6 million.
Because they're spread apart so far out there.
But I think go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think the double whammy of that is the payback part of it was the customers were a part of that. So if we're still got the same amount of money, just not going that far, and we don't get that third part to pay for it, what
So if you had to take out a PFA bond,
additional on that?
an additional one, would the customers, if you went ahead and did the 6 million to get the customers online,
Would that help pay
the
back?
customers pay back?
I don't
Would
think
that be enough customers to service the loan or service the bond?
I would.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
think
we had
so.
looked at this as a third from SPOS, a third from new customers, and then a third from a rate increase to cover what we have existing, the 15.5 million. And then we got ARPA money at 3.9, so it gives us 19.4. And right now, it looks like we need about 25.5. But if I can, for us, for me and him, item number 2 is probably the most important item on this page. And it's being able to find a couple of other wells to produce water. Because that's our biggest worry and our biggest concern. If I can find them close, the 650 will be enough, be clean. If I have to go a mile or so away, a mile and a half away, I'll change it a little bit.
So, back to what Ashley was saying, if we had a third, and a third, we're only getting 2/3 on the revenue side, and we're still keeping the same dollar amount for the project, even though it's not doing everything. Where are we coming up with that other 33% from? Because we've already done the rate increase, so that's kind of out of it. We only got limited amount of SPOS, that's kind of out of it. We're not getting to the customers to get their money. So we out of option.
There's options.
So, I mean, if you want to get two customers, you could pick one or the other and say, we're going to get to the customers here or get to the customers over here. You could, you could go borrow money, but you're probably looking at another rate increase if you do that. Because, the additional customers you're going to get were already factored into the rates we've got now. So, I think, if you want to pick one or the other to get to some customers, and I don't know what that math looks like, but, that's one potential approach. I don't.
Well, it's not going to reach 100. We know that because we only got half the customers. So we're at 17.5% instead of 33 or whatever it is.
And the courageous part of the conversation is we left off on that at the last meeting. You either go to the wall like Baldwin County, right? And you factor that in, and there's an ad valorem effect that happens to every lot. And over time, there's a plan to get to all of those lots. And you have that special tax allocation district, however you want to call it, economic development, whatever we need to coin it as, to get there. Then when we get there, we can roll it back, right? Because we know how to do that. It may take 10 or 15 years, but you stop piecing it together and you have a solid source that everybody's participating in. I don't know if anybody listened to NPR or whatever Georgia Power just did yesterday. What was it? Was it $3 billion shortfall? And everybody's chipping in on it. I think we're all going to get a $17 rate increase. Everybody's chipping in on it. We can't go to the current water customers for this kind of money because there just isn't enough in the rate increase to make it make sense. But if everybody that owns a piece of property in the county participates, then it makes sense. And we get there. And that's courageous. But we solved the problem. And you put in a solid plan to get us there in 10 to 15 years. Because I can't imagine, not that I want to do 4 mills or anything like that, but just something that is nominal but meets the requirement to satisfy the debt.
That's an idea, Dale, but the other side of that argument would be the people in the various areas where they're not going to have water in 50 years, the outlying areas, they're going to come back with an argument of, hey, my taxes went up and there's no plan for water for me. But
You make a plan to get there is what I'm saying. It'll take 15 years, but you'll get water or you'll never get water. So that's the option. You'll get water or you'll never get water.
That's the pattern Baldwin County was, utilizing. I mean,
Right.
it took a while. It took, 5 SPLOST 10 to
20
I
years,
know it took 4.
16.
SPLOST. And I mean, it's,
you need to have an inclusive plan for the areas that need water. We need to have a plan to include these areas.
And I would say that you have to identify a funding source, right? Because if we don't do that, then all we're doing is dreaming, right? The plan is no good unless we have actionable items that we can really address, and the funding source is it. We cannot get to everyone in this county, or even most people in this county, off of the current water customers. It's not realistic. Unless the water bill was $1,000 a month. I'm on a well, so if y'all do that, more power to you. I don't encourage it and I'd vote against it, but that's the only way for us to get there, short of everybody participating. But it solves a serious issue not only for water supply for people who don't have it or who have inadequate supplies, but it also addresses our fire protection. And I would feel comfortable paying an extra, let's call it $100 a year, right? Saying Avalorum, 700,000, right, for a mill?
Very close.
Right, real close. So, you know, that mill might cost me $50 or maybe $75. I don't know what the number is right now. I tried to get it, but they didn't have it. So it might cost me $75. But in the long run, I'll end up saving that on my insurance, right? As the ISO ratings come down, I'm going to save way more than that over my insurance. But for the next 10 years, the furthest person out, you have hope. And that's what the pastor talked about the last time. There's hope. Give us something, right? If you're going to tax me, give us something. I live on the well, so I'm going to be paying for it, and I'm never going to benefit from it. Because I'm never going to tie into the water. I love the way my water tastes. I love the fact that I always have water, and I love the fact that I don't have a water bill. So I'm going to pay for it, and I'm okay with that to make sure that everybody gets what they need.
Unless you open that faucet, nothing happens.
Then I'm going down to the pond. On my next door neighbor, Mr. Gray. What's that pipe doing over there? It's for me. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I mean, but in all honesty, we got some people that don't have that option, you know, and so many people say, and I think that's what we were talking about. One of the things that the Baldwin County done was, if you say you want water, you got to start paying. But I think without that survey, we don't know if 50% of our 28,000 residents are going to say, yes, I want water, or if it's 20% or if it's 70%. I want water, meaning, yes, I'm going to get there one day knowing that there's a plan to get there. Because if however how many we have that are Commissioner Martins and says, never going to want it, take me off the list, then that's not something we can add into our equation for paying it back.
I'm only going to disagree from the standpoint from the Avalorum
Right,
side. You'll get
right.
that part.
And that goes back to what John says, because I know in my district, I got constituents that would come unglued by it, because I can honestly say, I don't think we'll ever reach Juliet with water lines. It's just hard for me to imagine we're going to go 10 or 15 miles through a national forest with not one single customer
So
to get there.
the creative part is, hey, Tim, find us a well on that side or a water source, right? So we have to get creative. It may not be connected directly, but even out in Haddock, that might be an option. Find us a well, and let's supply water directly from that site to meet those particular needs. And I don't know if it's called a pocket plan or whatever, but that may make more sense than trying to run a line, right? No different than, I can't imagine running sewer from the industrial park to Juliet. Not going to happen. But a pocket sewer plant or a package pocket sewer plant makes sense. So let's be creative in how those things happen. And that may even give us some backup. But we know that current water customers have always funded future growth. And that's part of the challenge too. Here you have these people that always experience a rate increase, and the rate increase is really about servicing the next customer. It's not so much about improving my water service, but it's about servicing some debt to help some other people get water.
Tim, you touched on a massive L. Yeah, that's something we need to work on as far as we're short on supply. I mean, that's got to be first. But correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these projects, as we're looking, Sand Creek and all, those aren't projects that need, the last two boards put in place. That's stuff that's been on the books for quite some time. Isn't that correct?
We started talking about a lot of these in 2012.
Right. So, I mean, this is, we spoke about when we did this, there was so much stuff that had been started. This board had, but the previous board, Commissioner Martin and Commissioner Kitchen, we were on the Gray Highway. It wasn't finished, and I think we got it. So we've got, a lot of this stuff has been on halfway done for quite some time, and we're finally finishing that. And somebody made a comment. I just told him, I said, we're still trying to finish what we started, and this is one of them. But the well, definitely, we've got to find. Would you tell me 1,000 gallons a minute more than what we got, just to make sure we keep a?
We need a second well at Nashville because we got 1,000 gallon minute filter. And our first well there does 465. So
Okay.
if I could get another one that did 465, the high service pumps would run all the time, and that would help us. But really, we need 1,000 gallons a minute of what I call new water.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I've got some feelers out to see if I can find something in that area. I've made some contacts, and they're, just give them a heads up what we might need and see if there's any interest. So, I'm working on that area.
Quick question, because you mentioned water source, and we talked about this at least 2 or 3 months ago, going back to the cannery and identifying some other people that own lakes. Did we follow up with that? Did we get any feedback from that?
The cannery, whoever owns the cannery now, I guess the best way to describe it, decided they needed to scrap all the electrical stuff, wiring that was inside,
Right?
and the filter building is pretty much gone.
Mm-hmm.
The basin is still there, the clarifier mixing trough is still there,
Mm-hmm.
but with the filter bed set in the control room and all the electrical, it's all been caved in.
So, is the water source as important as the plant, or is the plant more important than the water source?
As we had
But
talked
without a
about.
water source, you don't have a plant.
Very good. Thank you. I knew you'd do that. So that means if there's a water source, can we locate a plant or a well there? Because at the end of the day, I thought that's what we were looking for, just
There are
water.
2 wells there.
Mm-hmm.
Together, they did about 230 gallons a minute. Now, they're probably older than I am,
Okay.
so they probably have to be re-drilled. The 3 lakes that went with the cannery, without any rain for 90 days, would produce 1.2 million a day. When the cannery property was sold, they were sold, and I'm not sure who has them. We have looked at a surface water plant.
Yep.
And also, we looked at Juliet because of the dam that's there, because we'd have to build a reservoir. We've looked at Commissioner's Creek, because of the flow of Commissioner's Creek.
Did we come up with any determination coming out of Juliet or any of those others?
Plant's about 18 million bucks.
Mm-hmm.
The plant is, there's no line work, and I didn't take the time to figure out line work because I really didn't know where the plant would end up being.
Gotcha.
Now, we have done, y'all authorized us to do some work with Wilkinson County Development Authority. We tested a nitrogen road well. We're waiting on chemical analysis to come back. And again, that well's probably 67 years old. It pumped at 150. It tailed off a little bit at the end. One of the wells out there is flowing, naturally flowing, has no pump in it. I told Jason that if we end up going down Grizzleville shortcut 18, that may be a good area to build a plant and drill 3 or 4 wells and get 1,200 gallons a minute out of it. The Wilkinson County Development Authority wants water at the nitrogen, potable water at the nitrogen road site. Part of that's in Jones, part of it's in Wilkinson. But they're open and receptive, which County has not been. And we may be able to find 1 million gallons, 1,000 gallons a minute, or maybe we'll get a little bit more out of that area out there. Which for me is good, because I can pump straight to the 49 gram storage tank.
Mm-hmm.
From there, we can send it anywhere. The biggest reason behind the elevated tank is when Gray opens up, it just kills us. It kills standpipe on that air to drive. Having the elevated tank will buffer that. The line type booster pump should be bigger than 800 gallons a minute, but we can't produce the water to keep it full. So we cut down the capacity of it. So, Nitrogen Road, Wilkinson County area out there off 18 is a possibility. Masseyville, either behind the plant or across the street from it, is a possibility. This property over between the Largo well and Fox Road, there kind of the end of the industrial park, I think that's a good possibility as well. But between the three locations, we probably can get the water we need. It's just gonna take, we've got to, it's gonna take a little time dealing with property owners. If they're receptive.
And pretty much that price was about 18 million to start, right?
Yes. You gotta lay out the cost estimate in that stuff I gave you.
Okay.
You know, we get back to the 6 million short, and I made a comment, you know, said something, Brandon and Jason and all, you know, we used to have our own install crew. And I shared that with Brandon and his thoughts, and I think with the right people, it could work. You want to share on it? I mean, you and I talked about it, and
With the right people, for sure. I know I feel right now. we'll
Sure.
have support.
how many people you think it'd take to?
3 at a minimum,
Right.
a bare minimum.
Let me ask it a little different way, Chairman.
Sure.
When we used to put lines in, did we have 25 people then and we have 21 people now, whether we moved them to other departments or we didn't fill a position or attrition or retirement, whatever? Did it, at some point, we have more staff and we were doing a service that we're now contracting out that we don't have now? Just so we'll know that at some point, whether it was a board vote or whether a recommendation or whatever to change the way we're doing business now, there was a cost to it. Up or down, there was a cost to it. And if we know that we saved $2 million 5 years ago and now we need that service, well, I think we need to recognize that that's a $2 million cost. And, you know, so we don't need to look at it like, oh man, we're going to increase the budget or we're going to increase the department. Well, we should be not paying for somebody else to do it and save some money, so we really shouldn't be increasing costs. But I just didn't know if we had that in the past, and I don't know the answer.
The 12 of us, while I was asking Brandon, there's 12 in the water department now. There's the lead guy, the 2 operators, there's a meter reader, there are 3 ladies inside. Donnie handles all the locates, that leaves about 4 to do everything else.
Just so I don't talk about a pink elephant, just I remember Chuck and Anthony, and I don't remember who the third person was, right, that was doing installs, right? Chuck still works for us. Anthony is gone.
He went to Public Works, but I don't know if he's still there or not.
Right, but Chuck is still here, and Chuck used to lead that operation, so I'm assuming Chuck still has that same skill set. And I know at one point they were outlaying even some contractors because they knew the areas, they understood the equipment, and they were rolling. He, Anthony, and the other guy could lay more pipe than some of the professionals, or contractors. I'm a fan of that. That's a no-brainer. I mean, the work that we can do, we should do, right? Or the work that we should do, we can do it. And obviously, if the savings is there, I mean, if Sam quantified it as $2 million, and we know that project still takes, 10 months or a year. 3 Jones County employees can't make $2 million in a 10-year period unless they're all department heads.
I just threw a number out.
I'm just giving that
You know how
perspective.
my figuring is. Don't go off my figure.
Hey, but I'm just giving that perspective. No different than
Yeah.
$45,000 to paint a room. I mean, a building. Like, I can hire one guy all year to paint that room. Way I think, like, why?
You gotta be a tall guy if you can get up second floor, though.
I'll rent him a scissor lift. I'll buy him a scissor lift at this point from an auction. But yes, put the crew back. I mean, that
I
makes
think
sense.
let Brandon pick his crew that he feels comfortable with, and put the right people in the right places, and
Of course.
Because it's going to take management. And I'm just going to be plain. I don't think we had the right management back then.
Right.
So that was the problem, and I think we've got that right management now. And Brandon put the people in the right place to make this a profitable deal, and
So just so we're clear, Brandon is the management, not the commissioners, because that was part of the problem too.
well, that's, I agree that.
Okay.
Brandon runs this department.
Amen.
And I'm proud of the, we've got some great department heads now, and I'm
Right.
proud of them, but I mean, that's.
So we're gonna give him the money to hire the people, is what we're saying. That, I just want to skip to that part.
I'm for it.
Okay.
Because we're gonna save money. If you figure out what the install is right now, Tim, our biggest expense right now is labor, isn't it?
You're preaching to the choir, Chris. I've always been a numbers guy, so I'm always there. So we're authorizing Brandon to hire whatever he needs for his crew, the install.
Well, we can't make the vote right now, but.
Oh, no, no,
Yeah,
I'm just,
yeah.
yeah.
But, let him build it.
Equipment too.
Uh-huh. Well, we got a lot of equipment sitting around, so there's an opportunity there.
So have we done a feasibility study or an analysis on contract versus in-house
That was
labor?
gonna be the next thing too, to just make sure we're,
I have to do that on every project. If you're gonna bid in-house, then let's see what, I mean, you're talking labor, you're talking benefits, you're talking equipment, you're talking time, and other responsibilities on this crew, 3 men, versus paying a 3-man company X number of dollars to do a project. Let's look at those numbers and see.
Gotta weigh
Because
it out.
I think you hit the nail on the head. We don't manage day to day, but we set expectations. And which is why now our expectations can be met based on management. And we set the expectation that it's the bottom line is if we're running 2 miles of pipe a week and a contractor can run 5 miles, we're not gonna benefit from that. If a contractor can run 5 miles with 3 men, we should be able to run 5 miles with 3 men. If we're comparing apples to apples and we can save money, that's where it's gonna make sense to do it. And so when we say, are we gonna give Brandon the resources to do it with? Yes, as long as the analysis is that the resources he has is the resources we're paying for. I don't think it's fair to say we're gonna hire 10 people to do what we're paying 3 contractors to do. That doesn't make any sense, because we'll pay more that way, but hand in hand with the management side of it, expectation, management, resources, get the job done.
Just,
something we need to look at, absolutely.
When we did this before, we had to run 5,800 feet a month to break even with a contractor. We may got half of that.
With the contractor.
No,
Or
we got half of
in-house.
that with crew. We weren't close.
All right. So we know what the internal expectations are of a crew.
I mean,
And so I guess that's the answer is, we're gonna get the crew and the, so for me, it would be 6 months from now, if we have a crew and they're not doing what three contractors can do, we got the wrong crew. So, just being real.
They just have to have clear goals and expectations and be reasonable about it.
Got another question. So 3 years worth of work here when it gets done. Is that just 3 year route?
I don't think we're ever going down. I think we're always going, we're talking about,
That's what I
when we
think
get
you
these
said.
expansions in the ground, they're not gonna maintain themselves, so you're gonna have a lot more percentage of maintenance than you do now based on number of miles of pipes in the ground.
So I'm super practical. I'm just going to look at the second page, and I had to get Jason to make sure I'm doing this right. Under item 1A, there's 4,500 linear feet, right, of 6-inch force main, and that costs $180,000 to lay. And our crew is doing half of 58, which is 2,900, right? And let's just say they made $4,000 a month, so there's $8,000 for 2 guys to run 2,900 feet. If they were still the same level of productivity, in 2 months they'd run 5,800 linear feet at 16,000 versus almost 360,000. So that's my practical feasibility study. So I could say that our 3-man crew in their reduced capacity or productivity is still saving us 300,000, close to that. They may not get it done as fast, but they'll get it done and they'll save us some money, which will create more opportunity to lay more pipe. That's how I do it. That's how I've always done it.
Well, I mean, you got, yes, agreed, because you factor in equipment at that cost, pipe at that cost.
Yep.
When we pay a contractor, it's a turnkey project. We're just talking about hourly rates of somebody to do the work.
Yeah. And I didn't even go down the line and go 114,000 plus 399,000 plus 222,000. It's $1 million worth of install by the time I get to line 5.
Right.
And if 6 guys can save me $1 million over a 2-year period, I'll take it.
So I think that's one good piece to the puzzle is looking at the cost difference and bringing it back in-house versus a contract, along with the expectations and the right resources.
So we're gonna leave Jason. Not Jason. Brandon, you got till 6 o'clock. No, just kidding. Next.
6, Jason? Brandon?
We'll be waiting for you, sir.
Give us a little bit on this because
Oh yeah.
what's the operator going on? $25
You here?
Decent equipment operator, at least 25.
Yeah.
At least 25 an hour.
Mm-hmm. Right out of high school.
Amen. So you got it.
Minimum.
Yeah.
With experience, 30 plus.
Amen.
That knows what they're doing.
That's the problem we ran into before. We're not laying up this room.
Of course.
We're laying on one-to-one slopes in places.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody can go do that.
Train them and pay them.
But it was done through Creekside, and it's holding.
It was done through Creekside. It was a fight to get through Creekside.
Right. I heard stories.
You got PVC in the ground where you should have ductile iron in the ground.
Right.
Because they didn't have the proper management to put the right pipe in the right place.
Did not.
That's,
You
I've already talked to some of those that have been there and done that and said, yeah, just management problem. So,
We replaced one place twice because the right stuff wouldn't fit in the ground anyway.
Amen. Get what you pay for.
Mr. Cookfield, you got something? All right, let's make sure. All right, where we go from here? Is there anything else on the,
So are we bringing back figures? Because I know for our finance folks, we gotta see what does that dollar amount look like at $25 an hour times 3 times material times time.
And the other thing we gotta look at is how much cost does that add to the department, because we still borrowed the same amount of money. I mean, we still borrowed $15.5 million, and we still got the same debt payment. So if we add a crew,
So,
can we pay for them out of SPOS? Do we have to pay for them out of War Department revenue?
I don't think you can pay for my applause. I don't know.
Thank you, Luvita. Her face said no.
The only way to do that is to,
Fee for it.
if they're just working on SPOS projects, you can charge them back to the project.
Yeah.
You can't just officially pay
Pay
anybody
salary
by
out of
SPOS.
SPOS.
And remember, your SPOS has already been obligated to all of these debts.
Right.
So where you gonna come up with some more SPOS funds from?
So what he is not talking about creating more SPOS funds. Instead of creating another debt where there is an install price, the crew is going to be responsible for that install, so you're paying them as a chargeback to the project, right?
Right.
So the money's already there. And I'm just using line item 1A, there's $180,000 for laying 4,500 pipe. Chuck, Anthony, and Brandon don't cost Brandon maybe, $180,000 for the year. And then you've got at least 7 more of these where there's opportunities to get the money from.
Your SPOS has already been obligated to pay these bonds. You only got $632,620.72 left.
So what I'm
But
saying,
that's
Vita,
15.7.
Vita, what I'm saying is you allocated the money already for the install.
That
And
was
line
part of
item
the
1A.
15.7?
Correct, it's in
Okay.
there, yeah. Okay, thank you.
So at a minimum, we go farther down the road and get more customers.
Absolutely.
right,
Right.
we're trying to get that deficit
In
of
that
6
same
million.
debt, in
And
that
if it
same debt
means
service.
doing it in-house,
Right.
to save
So
money.
then we get our 33% back of the 6 million that were underfunded.
We
Essentially,
got to come up with some, think outside the box right at this point.
Right, essentially, you take the profit overhead in-house versus contractor, and you go further with the pipes and materials. And so I think we'll go leaps and bounds.
Yeah. And I still say I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Go ahead. I said with the right people, right management, we'll go leaps and bounds further.
And you still tack on the economic development component or capital campaign, however you need to phrase it, so.
But I do, I think what Tim was saying is when we're swapping the profit and overhead we're paying in a contract that we can pay for out of SPLOST, we're now putting that in general fund, paying salaries and benefits that we can't pay for out of the debt service.
Correct.
So if we save $2 million to put back in that project, that $2 million is coming out of the general fund, and we got to figure out where to pay for that at. Even though the project goes longer, we didn't reduce our $6 million deficit.
Right.
We just shifted it, and
To the crew and equipment, correct.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I'm suggesting you still have that backdrop of protection with the economic development ad valorem fee to make sure you're covered. And the reality is, we know today this is the price. Tomorrow the price is different. And 6 months from now the price will probably be way different. And that helps us save that money, or at least be protected if we have to come up with the additional money.
right.
We will probably come back, and part of this will be additional property fencing to store all this, because 25,000 feet, 16 truckloads of pipe, plus fire hydrants, plus fittings, it's got to be on lock and key or your wall.
So the first place that comes to mind is this abandoned school.
The piece of property that's directly behind
That
the
we
water
talked
park is
about.
for sale.
Is it big enough? I don't think it's big enough for that, but the school might be.
It may be, I don't know,
We got room at Public Works.
16 truckloads?
but
Yeah.
if you're working on Graham Road, that's a long haul, go back before we get materials.
Yeah.
We may have to put them on Curtis Games or somewhere, so we already got a site. Or we may be able to just use a lot of them right time, over the way, put some of it there.
I'll let y'all management folks work that part out.
Any more comment or ideas on the finance of the current projects?
So I know we've kicked it around, we've talked about it in the past, but I mean, are we gonna look at an option of not an additional amount of tax revenue, but dedicating something we already have? Whether it's a $500,000 or a full meal, we know that that's already committed in our general fund if we're already collecting it. So that means we've got to commit to finding or maintaining that additional money every year. If it's $1 million, then we're going to have to make sure that we don't change our budget in that tune at any time over the next years. So we gotta know that. Personally, I would rather do that than talk about an increase.
Yeah, we don't need any increases.
Well, I agree 100%. I've said from day one, I don't want to go down as somebody that didn't tighten their belt, make sure we were doing everything as effectively and efficiently as we can, and open book and transparency and all the stuff that most of us ran on and talked about when we took this job. But I can look any taxpayer in the face right now and say, since I've been on this board, and I know everybody can say it in their own timeline, we have not raised the millage rate since I've been on this board. I don't believe, but there's been but 1 year that we didn't roll it back 100%. If you look back 7 years ago at what our tax rate paid for at that time and the cost increases over the last 7 years, I can look anybody in the face and say, if you tell me what the price of eggs were 7 years ago, or per a gallon of gas 7 years ago, let's talk. Because I think we've done a very good job in maintaining, and I know Delon talks about the budget increases. It does. It increases every year based on the value of everything, based on the value of people's houses, based on the value of the dollar, based on the taxes that come in, based on car titles, people buying nicer things. Well, we've managed based off that budget. So we didn't increase the budget at the expense of the taxpayers. the taxpayers increased our budget by the expense of the economy, or the price of the economy. So all that rolls into it. But I think we've done a really good job of being efficient with the taxpayers' money. So when we, if there comes a time where we've got to have a tax increase to maintain, to be able to provide the basic services that we're looking for, I want to be able to sleep at night and look people in the eyes and say, here's why we had to do it.
I don't want to rain on anybody's parade or drop somebody's ice cream in the pool. But when we don't, that's a good thing to say, Sam, and I think there's truth. But when we delay the infrastructure improvements that we have to do, and now it's massive, and this is not your responsibility. This started before I probably moved here. Now it's $45 million. That's the issue. If I can say, hey, I didn't replace the roof on my house for 60 years, but now when it's time to replace the roof, I got to do the roof, I got to do the insulation, I got to do the shingles, I've got to do the ductwork for the AC unit because so much has happened because I didn't do that part. That's my concern. We've got so much aged infrastructure because not just this board or any board or the board before that, but boards for years didn't make the necessary improvements to the infrastructure or add on as growth happened. We are capped out to a certain degree at growth because we can't produce more water to have more people here. And the reality is if a business came in and it needed 2 million gallons of water today, we're going to be in trouble. And that's a thing where vision has to happen, where we see Haddock needed water 16 years ago, there's a plan, and maybe Haddock needed water 16 years ago and they got it today. Juliet needed water 20 years ago and they got it. They get it 4 years from now because we planned for the growth. I don't want to just say we didn't raise taxes, but we didn't do anything either. We didn't raise taxes, but we didn't change out all of the fire hydrants that needed to be changed out and added the equipment that we needed. And again, I think there is absolute truth to being efficient. I just don't want to leave the county worse than when I found it. I don't want everything to be falling apart when we get ready to go. And you're a facilities guy, so you know that. Delayed depreciation is no joke. When you finally pay it, you pay it. So.
What was our total cost, Tim, for Gray Highway to Sand Creek, turn right and go back out Graham Road to the church? Just rough estimate.
48. 4.8, 4.9.
In 2013, it was 2.1. Right. And there may be more added to it, but I was just looking at. I mean, and then I was just going back to what Daylon said when we don't do projects for 6 or 7 years because we don't have the funding. That was the last time it was looked at.
Yeah, we're up, I think right now we're out, almost 30-40% on projects at this point?
It's a good 40. The problem we're seeing is that materials are getting more readily available. Price is not coming down.
Of course not. Because wages are up, sir, right? The cost to get that good.
I'm talking about material prices aren't coming down.
Yeah. But I'm just saying.
Labor is so difficult to find. And, I talked to a contractor 3 weeks ago about a wastewater treatment plant. He said, I'm sorry, I can't bid it. He rattled off 5 projects. They were $185 million. 5 projects. 4 years ago, that would probably have been 80 million. And, he's like, I'm tapped out. I can't bond anything else. And it's a problem we're seeing. Now, Homer Roberts Road, we've got about 6 plant holders. We hadn't had that in 5 years on anything. So I don't know if some of the private work slowing down because of interest rates. It really depends on who you ask.
Yeah, I do think that's a valid point that you're going to start seeing. So I think we're here because production is back pretty close to where it was pre-pandemic. But it's kind of like when the prices for a gallon of gas go from $2 to $3, and then on the news you see that gas prices drop 10 cents, everybody jumps for joy and runs to the gas station. Well, you're still 90 cents higher than you were a year ago when it was $2. So it goes up and it comes down a little bit and everybody's happy. But when you're talking about big scheme of things like this, production was the problem why prices was sky high, because everybody needed it, nobody could get it. It's supply and demand. Well, now the supply is there, the demand is still there, but the supply is matching it. And I don't want to say corporate greed, but
You got to remember cost of goods though, because the cost to produce that good is higher now. Because it used to be I was $13 an hour, now I'm $17, $22 an hour. So the material cost is now impacted by the new labor rate, right, and the inflation, and they're paying for fuel and everything else costs more. So when people were talking about price resetting, I'm going, nah, you're not going to see a price reset. Chick-fil-A costs way more now than it used to, and they're not going backwards.
Well, a lot of times when people start looking at their future prices, they're talking about their risk involved in future obligations that they're unsure about. So that's where your price increases come from. When those unknowns become better knowns, the prices should come back down a little to where you're making your profit margin that you originally, in your original, business model was reflecting. I mean, just knowing what I know about the building industry and what we're seeing, the margins are higher than what they were pre-pandemic. So I do expect them to come back down a little bit. No, they're not ever going to be. I don't ever think they're going to be back where they were. But they can't stay where they're at, because you're going to start seeing the haves and the have-nots in the building industry, and that'll change things in itself.
In 08, it took 2.5 years for all the DOT work to clear out and bring prices down. And that's the problem we've got now, is that
Interstates.
especially the wastewater plant manufacturers, the pump stations, those guys have got between 2 and 3 years worth of work backlog on order. The readings come out. They'll have 3 record years in a row.
Amen.
Sitting and waiting. And, pump stations quit, they're mechanical. Same with shafts, with motors and everything else.
And all that rolls downhill to us, to us as taxpayers and us as voters of taxpayers' money.
So the idea of leveraging a mill, an existing mill, for economic development, capital projects, makes good sense, because that moves as our tax digest moves without us doing any work. Is that going to be on this agenda or next one?
Again, I think, are we going to have how we can make that happen? Because what we don't want to do is have that mill restricted to general fund where we can't make a payment or something. And we can't restrict it to, I won't say restrict it to economic development, because, that has all kind of implications, complications too. But
So do we do it like the Board of Ed, we just blanket generic?
Might be a Levita question.
I think that's a
Jones County Board of Ed,
Ed.
generic.
So
So if we were trying to allocate a mill to cover infrastructure, capital improvements, economic development, how can we label it so it's not locked to just doing one thing or not another? We kind of need it unrestricted.
So I'm going to talk through this.
Somebody else.
So
I said it, Chairman.
state law says you can dedicate one mill for economic development, but the way it's written is that goes to the development authority. So it's not. You couldn't say we're dedicating the 1 mill for economic development that the state law allows, and we're going to do water and sewer projects with it. There may be a mechanism for for dedicating the mill for economic development goes to the Development Authority, and you have an intergovernmental agreement that says, hey, they're gonna use that to borrow however much money to provide infrastructure in the county. There may be some way to do that. I'd have to dig some on that. If you just wanted to dedicate 1 mil for water and sewer, so if you did that, the thought would be to go borrow a large, sorry, go ahead.
Don't just want to limit it to water and sewer.
Okay.
So water, sewer infrastructure, because that can include roads, bridges, et cetera.
I got you.
We could put something like capital projects so that, I don't mean like a dollar amount of 250,000 or higher, meaning it calls it a capital project, but major infrastructure projects. So that we don't have an opportunity to come back and say, oh, I want to build a new park over here in such and such area for $112,000. I think we ought to take it out of that fund.
But the intent would be to use it for debt service, right?
Or, well, yeah, mostly.
Yeah, because I think those big projects, we're going to need to bond them or debt them in some way.
So I think that may get you to the point where it's like a general obligation debt issue, and that has to have voter approval.
Even for a meal we already collect?
I think if you're going to use it to service debt,
I thought as if you were asking for an additional.
now, so if you had, like if you worked through the ACCG bricks and mortar program, or whatever it's called, ACCG facilities, that's a way, or that's a workaround for the whole general obligation debt process. Now, I know you can do facilities with that. I don't know about if you want to do roads and that type of thing.
But that would mean each time we go get a project, much like the ballpark on Highway 18, we'd have to dedicate that because they normally take deed or title, right?
Mm-hmm. They do.
Right, and I can't see ACCG taking titles to roads.
Right.
And so I'm gonna have to have you do a little more research on that one. 'Cause
Yeah.
I like the idea of it being ACCG because then it's sort of neutral, project neutral.
Mhm.
If that makes sense. But I don't know that roads will fall under that.
So tell me all the types of projects that y'all would want to do. So roads,
Water, sewer,
water, sewer.
courthouse.
Okay.
Or you just put facilities.
Facilities.
So, yeah, water, sewer, roads, facilities. New construction
Debt.
for
Retirement of existing debt, I guess.
existing debt.
Service of new debt.
So I guess new construction would be under facilities, whether it's, like if it's a water treatment plant or a wastewater plant, still a facility. If not, it's a utility pipe.
And as a last resort, create the tax allocation district, right? Don't add a new tax, or create the tax allocation district for the purpose of it, right? And then reduce the millage rate by 1 point, so it balances out. That's a long, complicated way, but get you
Yeah.
unrestricted.
So that, I'm almost sure you gotta have legislative approval. I don't know about voter approval for a TAD. I don't know that we can do that at the local level. And the reason I say it is because I saw it, in the previous job where, the TAD was always moving. So when you revitalize an area and that goes away, and your taxes are not used for that, then that group is not taxed that amount, and you move it to another district. So it's constantly moving. And I
That's
think
because
they're-
it was one area as opposed to countywide.
Right. So if you do it countywide, you still can't take it off the books once you move out of an area because it's still countywide. So if you do it district, as the district moves, this one goes away, this one goes in, this one goes in, this one goes out. So you're moving the district around to get the improvement, so you're using the money for the district to get that improvement. But if you do it countywide, there's no way to take them all off until it's all done.
Right,
That makes
and I would think water and sewer, because it's a sort of, not an all or nothing, but it's a
Right.
massive project that is sort of all inclusive. But, that's just a complicated way.
You're talking about like a special service district.
Correct,
And
but I'm making it countywide though.
Right. And I think TAD's a little bit of a different thing. I think it's, but yeah, so if you did a special service district, you can issue debt two ways through a special service district. One is through revenue bonds. So if you've got something that generates revenue that'll service it, that's part of our issue with the water and sewers. We don't have revenue to service. So the other option there is general obligation bonds. And so you're back to the voters again, authorizing general obligation bonds through the special service district.
I know, I just did a generic Google because I remember it from class, but then it says approval of local governments, right? So I think when it,
Is that for a district?
yeah, that was for the district.
Yeah, y'all can create the district on your own.
But can you create it countywide?
Yes, I feel pretty certain you can. Actually, I'm answering questions I should be.
Yeah, because then you circumvent.
Jason, is this like River North? You talking about the special
Yeah.
tax district?
So if you did it countywide, wouldn't that be circumventing the vote for GO bonds
I don't
as
think
a county?
it's countywide.
You still have to do the voter approval. So you can create a special service district, just this group sitting here, but you can't really do anything with it
Right.
without going to the voters.
I would,
Unless you
I
got
think,
revenue for it.
my opinion, we created the PFA to give us an avenue to borrow money to do stuff with. And I think we already have a collection of funds from the taxpayers that was approved based on them trusting us to do what we're supposed to do with the money. So if we take a portion of that money, work that in with the PFA to bond the projects that we need done, something tells me that might be doable without, because we're not asking for the voters to give anything else, to do anything else. I don't know if that makes any sense.
You might could borrow money through the PFA and then have a intergovernmental agreement between the county and the PFA where you agree to give the PFA an amount equal to $1 million to service the debt on the money that they borrow on your behalf. Something like that.
And if we need to say 1 mil is 700,000 and we put 600,000 in there as a known debt every year, and we got 100,000 over, every 5 years, we make an additional payment. Something like that, That way, if it does, the values do go down and we only collect 599, we get $1 out of that 100,000 from last year. So you got a little bit of wiggle room there.
Worth researching.
But I think there ought to be, if we would agree as a board that we're gonna hold our feet to the fire on budget, because we have had money every year that we can put towards needs. I think we commit that need is the biggest need, and it takes our hands out of it.
Are y'all up for a 10-minute break and give,
Sounds good.
all right, if we could, we'll start back at 10 minutes from now. Take a little quick break. We're gonna be here a while. I know I could use it.
Need some coffee.
Need some coffee. They got some in there.
I don't think they have creamer.
Jason's probably got some fruit.
I think they
I
got
mean, some-
Starbucks.
You got stuff for me?
Scooters.
I think I do.
You don't think you do?
I can go check.
You don't think you do what?
He's got food creamer.
I don't think I do. I'll go look and see what I got.
That's what he said.
Anybody got a C charger? Because I'm gonna run out of juice based on how long y'all might be talking.
You got a,
I'll go get it out of the truck.
you don't have an app.